Brooke Hunter stepped onto the flight with a calm, confident air. Dressed in a sharply tailored blazer over a chic dress, her natural curls framed her face as she balanced a leather laptop bag in one hand and her boarding pass in the other. The bustling terminal of Skybridge Airline's domestic service had long behind her as she made her way down the airplane aisle, scanning the seat numbers with measured determination. She settled into the plush first-class seat, exchanging a polite smile with the passenger beside her as she placed her bag in the overhead compartment. Before diving deeper into this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know where you're watching from, and if stories like this resonate with you, consider subscribing to my channel. Tomorrow, I have another special story waiting for you. After a few moments of quiet concentration scribbling notes in a small leather-bound notebook, Brooke's serene focus was interrupted by a brisk presence. Jenna Thompson, a flight attendant in a crisply pressed uniform whose stern eyes seemed to miss nothing, paused beside Brooke's seat. "Excuse me," Jenna said in a tone that was courteous yet carried a distinct edge. "May I see your boarding pass?" Brooke looked up, surprised but unruffled, and handed over her pass with a small, confident smile. Jenna scanned the ticket, her brow furrowing as she murmured, "This is for first class, correct?" "Absolutely," Brooke replied, her voice steady and composed. Yet Jenna's expression grew troubled, as if some internal conflict was at play. After a long, heavy pause, Jenna returned the pass without further explanation, her lips pressed into a thin line as she turned away. Though the interaction seemed brief, an undercurrent of tension began to ripple through the cabin. Within minutes, another call to attention echoed from the main galley area. A second time, Jenna reappeared, this time with an authoritative tone that brooked no disagreement. "Miss Hunter, would you kindly step aside for a moment? I need to verify a detail regarding your booking." A hush fell over the first-class section as curious eyes followed Brooke's measured movements. With a polite nod and the quiet dignity of someone used to handling unexpected setbacks, Brooke gathered her belongings and followed Jenna toward the small galley area. Meanwhile, passengers whispered among themselves in low tones, their interest piqued by the unfolding drama aboard the flight. Once in the narrow passageway, Jenna's voice turned colder. "I'm sorry, but there appears to have been a mistake with your booking. I need to ask you to relocate to a seat in the main cabin." Brooke's eyes widened in disbelief. "A mistake? I booked this ticket weeks ago, and it was confirmed," she replied, her tone as cool as the air conditioning in the cabin. Jenna's eyes narrowed, and her posture stiffened. "I'm afraid that, according to our records, this seat is not appropriate for you. You'll need to take a seat in economy." A murmur of shock and confusion spread among nearby passengers. For a moment, a flicker of annoyance passed over Brooke's face, but it was quickly replaced by an inner resolve. "My ticket is perfectly valid," she stated calmly, though internally she was already formulating a plan. With measured grace, she nodded and quietly returned to her seat to collect her things. A few passengers now leaned forward in their seats, their eyes a mixture of sympathy and intrigue. Meanwhile, as Brooke walked down the aisle toward the economy section, she clutched her laptop bag a little tighter. The carriage of her steps was unhurried yet purposeful. Amid the whispers, a thoughtful smile played on her lips as she sent a short, cryptic text from her phone, "They'll call soon. Be ready." Before we continue, here's a quick reminder inserted to set the stage for what's coming next. She was humiliated and forced out of her seat, but just minutes later the same flight attendant who shamed her was facing consequences. No one could have predicted what happened during this flight would change everything, not just for the people on board but for the entire airline. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today, and if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Settling into her new, more cramped economy seat, Brooke tried to regain her composure as she gazed out of the window at the sprawling tapestry of cottony clouds. The steady hum of the engines underscored a delicate battle of wills playing out in the cabin. Around her, a few passengers offered sympathetic glances, while others quickly averted their eyes, unwilling to embroil themselves in the unfolding controversy. Not far away, Lila Evans, a kind, observant flight attendant with a soft voice and sincere concern, approached Brooke once again. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Lila asked quietly, placing a cup of water and a small napkin on the tray in front of Brooke. Brooke smiled warmly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sorrow. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied softly. "Just a mix-up, I suppose." Sensing there was more beneath the surface, Lila hesitated for a moment before adding, "If you need anything, please just let me know." Brooke's mind, however, was not on idle comfort. Every moment in the cramped economy section was a calculated pause in a game whose stakes extended far beyond an airplane cabin. As she pulled out her notebook again and jotted down a single, mysterious line plan in motion, she exuded a quiet confidence that belied the inner storm. Her every movement hinted at a deeper strategy, one that was already setting the wheels in motion to challenge a system steeped in bias. Meanwhile, back in the first-class section, Jenna Thompson continued her rounds with a false air of satisfaction. In hushed tones with her colleague, Travis Brooks, a seasoned flight attendant known for his dry humor and unwavering professionalism, she confided, "I don't know what it is about Miss Hunter, but she doesn't seem to belong here." Travis arched an eyebrow, his tone wry as he replied, "You sure you're not overstepping, Jenna? First class isn't for amateurs." But Jenna's conviction remained unshaken, and her internal justifications began to cloud her judgment. A few minutes later, the flight's PA system chimed in with a friendly reminder from the captain. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with Skybridge Airlines. If you need anything, please do not hesitate to ask." The announcement was delivered in a warm, conversational tone reminiscent of a hometown radio host on a breezy summer afternoon, a subtle nod to the airline's attempt to blend corporate formality with American charm. Brooke, whose eyes flicked momentarily toward the front of the cabin, closed her notebook with deliberate finality. Her mind was already racing ahead. She tapped out another concise text, this time directed to a trusted ally waiting off the plane. "Everything's on track. Let them come." Her fingers lingered over the screen for just a moment longer before she slipped the phone back into her bag, her expression a study in serene determination. As the flight progressed, Jenna's discomfort grew with every step she took in the cabin. The memory of her earlier confrontation with Brooke gnawed at her. In the galley, as she meticulously arranged drink carts, she couldn't shake the feeling that her actions were about to come back to haunt her. Just then, the in-flight phone buzzed, a call from the executive office. Jenna's heart skipped a beat as she answered hesitantly. "This is Jenna," she said softly. On the other end of the line was Executive Officer Felicia Warren, a no-nonsense leader with a reputation for exacting accountability. "Jenna, we have received a direct complaint regarding an incident involving a first-class passenger," Felicia stated firmly. "You are to provide a full report upon landing. Until then, ensure that every passenger is treated with the utmost respect and that no further seating changes occur without proper justification." Jenna's face flushed with a mix of indignation and anxiety. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely concealing her inner turmoil. The call ended, and as Jenna resumed her duties, the tension in the cabin deepened with every passing minute. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, hushed discussions and sideways glances filled the air like an undercurrent of impending change. Brooke, seated in the economy section with her eyes fixed on the ever-changing view outside the window, appeared completely unruffled. Every so often, she would glance at her watch, a quiet signal that her meticulously orchestrated plan was unfolding just as she had envisioned. Meanwhile, Travis Brooks kept a careful eye on Jenna from the galley, his voice low as he murmured, "Jenna, you've stirred up a hornet's nest this time." Jenna's only response was a tightening of her jaw as she continued her rounds. At one point, a kindly passenger seated near Brooke leaned over and whispered, "That flight attendant seems to be giving you a hard time, doesn't she?" Brooke offered a soft smile and a measured reply, "I appreciate your concern, but I've got it handled." The man's raised eyebrow and tentative nod hinted at his curiosity, yet he wisely left the matter alone. Soon, the calm monotony of the flight was broken by a more official announcement from Captain Morgan, a gruff, reassuring presence whose deep baritone lent the message both authority and a touch of Americana. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened and your trays are in their upright positions." His words resonated throughout the cabin like a familiar refrain from classic rock ballads echoing in a packed arena, reminding everyone that even in turbulence, there is order. As the aircraft began its smooth descent over the sprawling metropolis below, a blend of modern skyscrapers and enduring American icons, Brooke's expression remained unchanging. She reached into her bag, retrieved her phone once again, and sent a brief message, "We've landed. Be ready." A subtle smile flickered across her face, a smile that held both the promise of retribution and the hope of systemic change. Shortly after landing, as the plane taxied to the gate at a bustling airport reminiscent of the energy and diversity of New York City's terminals, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. Passengers disembarked amid a cacophony of relieved sighs and animated chatter. Brooke, however, remained seated, her mind already racing ahead to the next chapter of this unfolding drama. She gathered her belongings with meticulous care and headed toward the exit, every step measured and deliberate. At the gate, an almost cinematic confrontation was quietly underway. Jenna, still reeling from the earlier reprimand and the weight of Felicia Warren's phone call, was intercepted by two uniformed security officers. "Are you Jenna Thompson?" one of them asked in a tone that brooked no argument. Jenna's breath caught, her eyes darted with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. "We need you to come with us for questioning regarding an incident on this flight." A hushed silence fell over the immediate area as passengers and crew alike absorbed the gravity of the situation. Travis Brooks, who had been watching from a discreet distance, exchanged a worried glance with Lila Evans, whose kind eyes betrayed both concern and sympathy for everyone caught up in the chain of events. Outside, in the cool, brisk air of the terminal, Brooke stepped away from the commotion with an air of quiet authority. She was not seeking personal vindication. Her mission had always been larger, an opportunity to hold an institution accountable for systemic bias. As she walked briskly toward the baggage claim area, her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Priority service for Miss Hunter." Opening the message, Brooke read that the airline's board of directors had taken notice of the incident and were now implementing changes to ensure that every passenger, regardless of class, would be treated with the respect they deserved. In a quiet corner of the terminal, Jenna was ushered into a stark, fluorescent-lit room along with two security officers. Seated at a plain metal table, she found herself facing a panel of senior airline officials. One of them, a sharp-featured woman with an unmistakable air of authority, asked in a tone that brooked no argument, "Miss Thompson, we have received several accounts of an incident involving a first-class passenger. Are you aware that the passenger in question is Brooke Hunter, major stakeholder with direct ties to our board?" Jenna's eyes widened, and her voice faltered. I wasn't aware," she stammered, her mind racing through the possible consequences of her actions. The official leaned forward, her gaze unyielding. "Your actions were based on an assumption, not on any factual discrepancy with your booking records. You moved a paying customer from first class based solely on prejudice. Do you understand the severity of this breach of protocol? Tears of regret welled in Jenna's eyes as she realized the full weight of her mistake. She tried to explain, but every word felt hollow in the face of undeniable evidence. In the sterile room, Jenna's internal turmoil was laid bare, a bitter cocktail of shame, fear, and the dawning realization that her career might be in jeopardy. The meeting ended with a terse warning: further disciplinary action would follow, and Jenna would be suspended pending a full investigation. Back in the main terminal, Brooke's demeanor was as composed as ever. After a brief pause by the baggage carousel, she retrieved her sleek black suitcase and made her way toward a waiting sedan. The driver, a sharply dressed gentleman who bore a slight resemblance to a character from a classic American film noir, opened the door with a courteous nod. "Ms. Hunter," he greeted, "everything has been arranged as per your instructions." Brooke offered a small, wry smile in reply. "Thank you, William," she said, sliding gracefully into the back seat. Once inside, she took a moment to check her phone. An email from the newly appointed executive officer Felicia Warren confirmed that the board had mandated immediate reforms, including a comprehensive review of the airline's training policies and a commitment to eliminating bias in every department. Brooke's eyes glimmered with quiet satisfaction. "Let us ensure this never happens again," she texted back a final note that hinted at both retribution and redemption. A few hours later, inside the polished glass towers of Skybridge Airlines headquarters in downtown Dallas, Jenna sat in a stark conference room awaiting her disciplinary hearing. The room was suffused with an oppressive silence that magnified every ticking second on the clock. Senior executives entered one by one, each carrying the weight of responsibility. A woman with an icy gaze and a perfectly tailored suit addressed Jenna first. "Miss Thompson, thank you for joining us today. We are here to discuss the events that transpired on Flight 782. Your actions, which were based solely on unfounded assumptions, have severely damaged the reputation of our airline." Jenna's voice was barely a whisper as she tried to justify herself. I was following what I believed was protocol," she mumbled, her eyes fixed on the cold, unyielding panel before her. The executives questioned her in rapid succession, each query more pointed than the last. At one point, a middle-aged official with silver hair pressed, "Protocol dictates that a valid first-class ticket guarantees you a corresponding seat. When did you verify Miss Hunter's ticket?" Jenna's silence was as damning as any explanation could have been. Eventually, the hearing concluded with a final, somber verdict: Jenna Thompson was terminated. Outside the conference room, in the dim light of the airport's departure lounge, Jenna's emotions churned violently. Her dreams, built over years of service, now lay in ruins. In a moment of painful clarity, she reached for her phone and began typing an email addressed to Brooke Hunter. Every keystroke was heavy with remorse as she confessed, "Miss Hunter, I owe you an apology. My actions were inexcusable. I acted on unconscious bias, and in doing so, I stripped you of the respect you deserved. I can only hope that this mistake becomes a catalyst for my own personal growth and for systemic change within our industry." Brooke read the email later that evening in the quiet solitude of her upscale apartment overlooking the city skyline. The message, filled with genuine regret, stirred conflicting emotions within her. She knew that accountability was the first step toward transformation. With a measured tone, Brooke replied, "Thank you for your apology. Accountability is indeed the first step on the long road to growth. I hope you use this experience to bring about positive change not just in yourself, but in an industry that has long needed reform." In that exchange, the seed for future change was planted, a promise that systemic bias would no longer be tolerated. Over the next several days, the ripple effects of the in-flight incident began to permeate the culture of Skybridge Airlines. Felicia Warren, now at the helm of a newly reformed executive office, instituted mandatory sensitivity and bias training for every crew member. Press releases and internal memos styled in a crisp, modern tone reminiscent of a Silicon Valley startup heralded a new era of accountability. Journalists compared the dramatic turnaround to a scene from an award-winning indie film, replete with witty asides and nods to classic American protest anthems. In one particularly memorable staff meeting, Travis Brooks quipped, "You know, folks, if we can survive a mid-flight debacle worthy of a Law Order episode, maybe we can finally treat every customer like the VIP they truly are." Laughter rippled through the room, a moment of levity that underscored the transformation taking place. Even Lila Evans, whose gentle nature had earned her a reputation as the crew's unofficial morale officer, added, "At least now we know that even when we stumble, there's always a chance to rise again. And hey, let us be honest, if we can handle a mix-up at 30,000 feet, we can handle anything on the ground." Brooke's story soon spread beyond the confines of the airline industry, resonating with everyday Americans who had experienced injustice in their own lives. Social media lit up with hashtags like #SkybridgeChange and #RespectInTheAir, while late-night talk show hosts humorously compared the incident to the absurdity of a reality TV twist. Even Snoop Dogg made a cameo reference in an offhand tweet. "Sometimes the flight gets bumpy, but you gotta keep your head high and your vibe right," he mused, his trademark drawl echoing the sentiment of resilience and hope. In the weeks that followed, as the airline rolled out its new training programs and public commitments to change, Brooke found herself at the center of a movement that transcended a single flight. She was invited to speak at diversity panels and industry conferences, where she wove together her personal experience with broader themes of social justice and corporate responsibility. At one such panel held in a renovated warehouse in downtown Dallas, a space that echoed with the creative energy of modern art galleries, Brooke declared, "Change begins with accountability, but it thrives on persistence and the collective will to challenge the status quo. Today, we've taken a stand against discrimination, and tomorrow, we will soar even higher." Meanwhile, Jenna Thompson, now working at a nonprofit dedicated to workplace diversity and inclusion, began her long, difficult journey of self-reflection and rehabilitation. She volunteered for community outreach programs and took part in rigorous retraining sessions designed to help her confront and overcome her unconscious biases. In quiet moments, as she sat in the modest office of her new job, she recalled the fateful flight and the look in Brooke Hunter's eyes, a look that had conveyed not just indignation, but a deep, unwavering resolve to spark meaningful change. As the seasons changed and the crisp autumn air gave way to the soft chill of winter, the story of Flight 782 became a touchstone in conversations about respect, accountability, and the power of a single voice to challenge an entire system. In cafes, diners, and even at bustling sporting events, people recounted the saga with a mix of awe and humor, a reminder that even the most painful experiences can give rise to progress and hope. One might even recall a humorous aside from a late-night comedian: "You ever notice how an airplane ride can teach you more about society than a college course? I mean, 1 minute you're sipping a latte at 30,000 feet, and the next, you're witnessing a revolution in aisle 9. On a particularly clear winter evening, as Brooke sat in her office overlooking a city aglow with holiday lights, she opened her notebook to a blank page and wrote a single, resonant line: "Change begins with accountability, but it thrives on persistence." That phrase, a quiet mantra born of pain and hope, became a rallying cry for many who had followed her journey. It was a promise that the system, once steeped in prejudice and indifference, was on the cusp of transformation, a change that would echo across boardrooms, airports, and communities throughout the nation. In the end, the legacy of that tumultuous flight was not defined solely by a moment of humiliation or even by the subsequent corporate reckoning. It was defined by the resilience of those who had dared to stand up against injustice and the determination of a community to build something better. Brooke Hunter's experience became a symbol, a reminder that every setback can be the first step toward a future where respect and empathy are the norm, not the exception. As the plane of life continues to soar over ever-changing horizons, the echoes of that fateful flight remind us that even in the midst of turbulence, hope can be found. And sometimes, just sometimes, a single act of accountability can set in motion a chain of events that transforms not only an airline, but an entire culture. The sky, after all, is not the limit, it's just the beginning.